The whole president tried to have me arrested for trespassing on my own property. Big mistake. What she didn't realize was that I'm the municipal judge who could end her corrupt little empire with a single signature. It was 9:17 on a sweltering Saturday morning. I was out back wrestling a fence post into the dirt, sweat stinging my eyes, when the sharp clang of my post hole digger rang through the quiet neighborhood. Then whoop whoop. Police sirens shattered the stillness. 3 squad cars roared up my driveway, gravel crunching like breaking glass beneath their tires. I straightened, dirt streaked on my arms and caked under my nails, as 3 officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts. Behind them stood Cordelia Blackthorn's whole president, self-appointed Queen of Maplewood, leaning against her white Lexus with a smirk that could curdle milk. She radiated smug triumph. What she didn't know was that for the past 6 months, I'd been quietly compiling a federal fraud case against her. And thanks to this stunt, she just handed me Exhibit A. What would you do if someone sliced the police on you in your own backyard? And where are you watching from? Drop your state below. I'll let you know if your whole laws are as broken as ours once were. Let me rewind. My name's Harrison Webb, and I've been a municipal judge for 2 decades. After my divorce wrapped up last spring, I needed a clean slate somewhere peaceful where I could rebuild my life and maybe reconnect with my old passion for woodworking. Maplewood Estates seemed ideal, 147 homes tucked just outside Riverside County. They are filled with jasmine and the sound of kids playing instead of traffic. The house I bought sat on a beautiful corner lot with a spacious backyard perfect for the workshop I'd dreamed of building. At $185 a month in HOA fees, I figured I was buying into a well-run community. That illusion evaporated in just 3 weeks. Enter Cordelia Blackthorns. 49 years old, HOA president for 8 consecutive terms, and a predator in pearls. Her sharp-angled bob looked like it could cut sheet metal, and she dressed like every day was a corporate coup. Her spotless white Lexus gleamed like an extension of her ego. And somehow, she always appeared as if conjured right when you least wanted company. She had a habit of calling people sweetie and hun in a tone that felt less like affection and more like arsenic wrapped in sugar. Her overpowering floral perfume arrived before she did, mixing nauseatingly with the quiet dread she left behind. My first run-in with her regime came courtesy of vandalism. Some kid had used my mailbox for batting practice, so I did the reasonable thing, bought an identical replacement and installed it myself. Same design, same height, everything by the book. The receipt was still warm in my wallet when I heard the thud of certified mail landing on my porch. Inside the thick manila envelope, a violation notice so absurd it was almost impressive. An approved exterior modification, with a $150 fine escalating by $50 a day until I appeared at a compliance hearing. That's when my legal instincts kicked in. The notice was riddled with procedural flaws. I dug through the HOASCC and there's nothing about mailbox replacements. A walk around the neighborhood confirmed it. Dozens of identical mailboxes. Some newer than mine, none fined. I began documenting everything: photos, timestamps, comparisons, assembling a case file worthy of a courtroom. That's when Marcus from Lot 47 wandered over, beer in hand, shaking his head. "Let me guess," he said dryly. "Cordelia's got your number now." Marcus, an electrician, had plenty of horror stories, like the time she tried finding him for installing solar panels, even though he had every permit in the book. Then there was Mrs. Chen from House 23, ticketed for excessive decorations because she had 3 ceramic gnomes in her flower bed. The pattern was obvious. Cordelia targeted newcomers, professionals, anyone who didn't bend to her authority. With 20 years on the bench, I knew what to do: follow the money. Homeowners have a legal right to inspect HOA financials, so I filed a formal records request. Cordelia's response: a masterclass installing excuses, delays, and bureaucratic nonsense. Our first real showdown happened in the so-called HOA office, a converted bedroom that reeked of cheap pine-scented air freshener. Barely masking something rotten, Cordelia sat behind a foxwood desk with peeling laminate. The very picture of desperate authority. She made me wait 23 minutes. I timed it. Instead of fuming, I took photos of the posted budgets and the neglected community center. For an HOA pulling in nearly $400,000 a year, the place looked like it had been redecorated by a tornado. When she finally deigned to address me, her voice dripped condescension. "Judge Webb, is it, well? Here in Maplewood, we follow community standards, not courtroom rules, sweetie." The quiet click of my pen taking notes seemed to rattle her more than any comeback I could have delivered. That night, my kitchen table was covered in evidence, photos, and documents. I realized this wasn't about a mailbox or community pride. It was about control, ego, and likely embezzlement. Cordelia had just picked the wrong opponent. 2 weeks later, I decided to build a privacy fence around my backyard. Nothing extravagant, just a 6-foot cedar barrier so I could work without disturbing the neighbors. I filed the official application, paid the outrageous $75 review fee, and waited. 30 days passed. Then 40. By day 47, I still hadn't received an answer, just silence from Cordelia, who claimed my request was under careful review. Back in law school, I learned that bureaucratic delay is the favorite weapon of small-time tyrants. Deny people progress long enough, and they either surrender or slip up. By Saturday morning, I'd had my fill of waiting. So, I hired a licensed surveyor who spent all Friday afternoon mapping out my property lines, planting bright orange flags at every boundary point. The sharp metallic ping of his GPS gear echoed down the street as he worked, each reading triple-checked and logged. My divorce attorney once told me something that stuck. When facing hostile opponents, excessive documentation isn't paranoia, it's protection. So, at 7 a.m. Saturday, I grabbed my post-hole digger and got to work. The steady thunk, thunk, thunk of metal slicing soil blended with the hum of Marcus's coffee grinder next door and the warm scent of cedar planks heating in the morning sun. Within an hour, I had an audience. Marcus appeared with his mug of coffee. Mrs. Chen offered approving nods, and old Earl from Lot 156 volunteered to help haul lumber. That's when the white Lexus rolled around the corner, slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. 9:17 a.m. I'll never forget the time. I was checking my watch when Cordelia Blackthorns emerged, clutching a measuring tape and wearing an expression cold enough to freeze a wildfire. She'd clearly been watching from her window, waiting for the perfect moment to stage her little ambush. "Stop right there," she barked, her designer heels stabbing holes in my lawn as she marched toward me. "That fence crosses into whole common property." I straightened, wiped the sawdust from my hands, and handed her the survey report. "Actually, Cordelia, every post is 6 inches inside my property line. Verified by GPS. See for yourself." Her manicured fingers snatched the documents, scanning them like she could will the facts to change. When they didn't, she yanked out her own tape measure, a flimsy plastic thing from the dollar store that couldn't have measured a coffee table accurately. "I don't care what your papers say," she snapped, voice climbing high enough to send a flock of birds scattering. "The HOA has easement rights, and you're in violation of community aesthetics." That's when my training kicked in. Every judge learns the same rule early on: let your adversaries hang themselves with their own words. So, instead of arguing, I quietly pulled out my phone and started recording. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "I have a certified survey, municipal permits, and I'm operating entirely within code." Then came the moment that would haunt Cordelia for months. She stalked 30 feet away, still squarely on my property, and made a phone call loud enough for the entire block to hear. "Yes, I need the police immediately," she barked into her phone, pacing like a cornered wolf. "There's a man trespassing on whole property and damaging community assets. He's refusing to leave." The irony was almost too perfect. She was calling the police about trespassing while trespassing on my lawn. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. Mrs. Chen's jaw dropped. Earl muttered something about enemy tactics. I just kept working, the rhythmic hammering providing the soundtrack to her meltdown. Years on the bench had taught me that composure under pressure is the most effective weapon there is. 12 minutes later, the familiar crunch of tires on gravel signaled back up to squad cars. Lights flashing, 3 officers stepped out, led by Sergeant Rodriguez, whose face I knew well from countless court appearances. Your Honor, he said. Eyebrows raised. Didn't expect to see you here. Cordelia's face drained of color. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish out of water. And then because she couldn't help herself, she made things worse. I don't care if he's the Pope. She shrieked. He's breaking whole rules and destroying community property. The officers exchanged a look. Without a word, Rodriguez reviewed my documentation, survey, permits, deed. Everything. It was all airtight. Finally, he turned to Cordelia, his tone clipped but professional. Ma'am, this gentleman has full legal right to construct on his own land. There's no violation here, frankly. You're the one trespassing. Her retreat was dramatic, part indignation, part humiliation. Well, the whole still has authority over materials and aesthetics, she sputtered, heels clicking angrily as she retreated to her Lexus. As the police cars pulled away, Marcus grinned. Judge, she really didn't know who she was dealing with, did she? That's when everything came into focus. This wasn't about fences or aesthetics. It was about intimidation, control, and almost certainly money. Cordelia had just shown me her entire strategy: harassment, fake authority, and public embarrassment. And she just lost her first battle. Too bad for her. I'd been studying bullies far longer than she'd been pretending to hold power. The air was thick with the sweet scent of sawdust as I went back to work, but my thoughts were already racing ahead. If she was bold enough to fabricate violations, what exactly was she hiding in those financial records she kept dodging? Time to find out how deep her corruption really went. That fence fiasco lit a fire under me hotter than a Texas parking lot in July. By the next morning, I drafted a formal written request for 3 years' worth of whole board meeting minutes. Documents every homeowner is legally entitled to view. Cordelia's reply came faster than a pizza delivery. Excuses about storage issues and digitization delays. Hilarious. Considering the same woman could summon a police response in 12 minutes flat, but apparently couldn't locate basic records. From my experience with municipal contracts, I knew one universal truth: financial misconduct always leaves a trail. So, I started examining the public budget sheets posted in that shabby community center. The numbers didn't add up. $388,000 collected annually from 147 homes, yet nothing in the neighborhood reflected it. Then one entry flashed like a warning light: $89,000 paid to Pinnacle Property Services LLC for landscaping. Another $47,000 for pool maintenance, same company. And somehow, utilities for a barely used community center totaled $31,000 a year. Unless NASA was launching rockets from the pool, something was seriously off. Years investigating local corruption had taught me that shell companies are like roaches. Spot one, and there's a colony nearby. A quick business license search through my courthouse contacts gave me the smoking gun. Pinnacle Property Services was registered to none other than Derek Blackthorns, Cordelia's brother-in-law. My coffee went cold as I pieced everything together in my home office late that night. No competitive bids, no oversight, just a steady stream of homeowner money funneling straight into family pockets. That's when Cordelia struck back. Monday brought the first violation notice: unapproved landscaping modifications, my crime. Planting tomatoes. Tuesday, excessive outdoor storage, for keeping a garden hose on a reel. Wednesday, architectural noncompliance. Apparently my doormat didn't match the neighbor's. Thursday's grand finale, parking violation, for leaving my pickup truck in my own driveway. For notices in 4 days, $800 in fines. Escalating daily like interest on a bad loan. But Cordelia wasn't done showing off her imagined authority. Suddenly, the city received anonymous complaints about my fence. The police got false noise reports claiming I was running power tools after hours, while I was actually watching Netflix. On Facebook, fake posts popped up about certain residents who didn't respect community standards. Here's what 2 decades of courtroom battles had taught me: never lose your cool, and document everything. While Cordelia was busy pulling strings, I was quietly assembling a case file that would make any federal investigator salivate. I photographed identical landscaping setups throughout the neighborhood, none of them fined. took screenshots of her online gossip campaigns traced to whole board members, recorded her increasingly erratic voicemails, including one where she promised to make my life a living hell until I learned some respect. Each night, I sat at my kitchen table, swiping through evidence on my tablet, building a digital fortress of proof. Then, something started shifting. Support from the neighborhood began to surface like wildflowers after a fire. Marcus shared his own story over beers, fined $200 for solar panels that were fully permitted. Mrs. Jen stopped by with cookies and whispered that others were too scared to speak out. A young couple from House 134 approached me by the mailboxes, eyes weary. "We're thinking of selling," they said quietly. The harassment never stops. The pattern couldn't have been clearer. Cordelia was systematically targeting new homeowners, working professionals, anyone who might threaten her control or expose her little empire. Then came her next power play, the emergency board meeting, scheduled for Thursday night. The agenda read like code: resident compliance issues. Translation: how do we silence the judge? Only 3 of the 5 board members attended. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I walked into the community center carrying a folder thick enough to stop a bullet, a legal pad, and a voice recorder, all perfectly legal in our state, as I'd verified years ago during my prosecutor days. Cordelia went pale when she saw me. The other 2, Eleanor Vance, a retired teacher, and Bob Morrison, an insurance agent, looked confused, genuinely unaware of her harassment campaign. Agenda item 4, Cordelia announced, forcing authority into her voice. Property violations and enforcement procedures. That's when I made my move. I stood, opened my folder, and laid out my evidence like I was presenting before the Supreme Court. Photographs, documentation, timestamps for proof of selective enforcement so blatant it spoke for itself. Records showing a pattern of harassment. Questions about the suspicious absence of competitive bids for service contracts, with the authority earned from 20 years on the bench. I asked bluntly, where are the documents showing how Pinnacle Property Services was chosen? And why is this outfit receiving 65% of our yearly budget with zero oversight? Eleanor and Bob exchanged looks that could have powered small appliances. Folding chairs scraped the linoleum, filling the awkward silence while Cordelia scrambled for answers that simply didn't exist. Then she made her gravest error. Rather than try to contain the damage, she escalated big time. Judge Webb is intimidating board members with his position, she announced, her voice shifting into a dog whistle pitch. I move that we vote to limit his attendance at meetings for conflict of interest. Bob Morrison's insurance instincts kicked in. He smelled liability from a mile away. Motion fails for lack of a second, he declared, shutting it down. The meeting adjourned to the sound of papers rustling and chairs scraping, but that was only the prelude. Now I knew how rattled Cordelia truly was. When scared people panic, they make the mistakes that bring prosecutors running. The morning after that train wreck of a board meeting, I woke with a clarity that comes from finally seeing an opponent's hand. Cordelia wasn't merely crooked, she was desperate. Desperate people leave traces. I spent the week buried in state oversight statutes, flipping through books most homeowners use as doorstops. What I found was a prosecutor's toolbox: strict enforcement powers, criminal penalties for embezzlement, and personal liability for board members who breached fiduciary duties. My old colleague Risha Valdez, who'd carved out a reputation prosecuting white-collar crime, was exactly the kind of ally I wanted. Time to give her an early present. The breakthrough arrived when I used attorney contacts to pull the HOAS insurance claims. In that paper labyrinth was pure gold: $23,000 in claims for landscaping damage that never occurred. Maintenance logs were forged, signatures falsified, and cash had flowed straight into Pinnacle Property Services accounts like water through a busted pipe. The printer hummed through the night as I copied evidence that could topple Cordelia faster than a house of cards in a windstorm. Then she went nuclear. Thursday night, 10 p.m. maximum intimidation hours. There was a sheriff's deputy at my door with papers that spiked my blood pressure. Cordelia had filed for a restraining order, accusing me of stalking board members and abusing my judicial office to bully innocent volunteers. The irony was so thick it could be spread on toast. A woman who'd been tormenting me for months now painted herself the victim. What caught my attention most was that she'd hired top-tier legal counsel, the kind of lawyer whose hourly rate would make most people blanch. Where was an HOA president finding that kind of cash? She'd arranged a hearing in Riverside County to take it out of my local jurisdiction, a sly move, but not clever enough. Judge Patricia Henley was assigned to the case. Patty and I dated back to law school, surviving late-night constitutional law cram sessions fueled by bad coffee and stubbornness. Walking into that courtroom felt oddly familiar, even if this time I was on the other side of the rail. The metal of the defendant's chair was a cold reminder of the new perspective. Cordelia's attorney Bradley Kensington, slick suit and practiced theatrics, portrayed me as a rogue judge misusing power to intimidate a volunteer. He brought charts, timelines, and all the drama of a stage production, but he lacked substance. When I spoke, I methodically laid out the harassment timeline, the financial proof, and corroborating documentation with the meticulousness of a Swiss watchmaker. Every exhibit was labeled, cross-referenced, and supported by sworn affidavits from neighbors who'd finally summoned the courage to speak. Judge Henley saw through it immediately. She recognized a frivolous filing for what it was: legal bullying meant to clog the docket and waste taxpayer money. She not only denied the restraining order but sanctioned Kensington for filing without merit and ordered Cordelia to cover my legal fees. The gavel's fall rang sweeter than Sunday bells. Court victory was only Act 1. Back home in Maplewood, momentum was building like a summer storm. Marcus hosted an informal neighborhood meeting on his patio, lawn chairs unfolded like battle lines. 12 residents showed more than had attended whole meetings in years. Mrs. Chen produced 5 years' worth of violation notices totaling $3,400 for phantom offenses. The new family on an E89 produced photos of landscaping demands so extreme they'd have bankrupted a small nation. Earl, the retired veteran, revealed threats over his American flag display. Apparently patriotism offended Cordelia's aesthetic sensibilities. Consensus was unanimous: Cordelia had to go. That's when my strategy solidified. From prosecuting municipal corruption, I'd learned you need 3 prongs to unseat entrenched power: criminal charges, civil remedies, and public pressure. Hit from all sides at once, and even the most arrogant fall. A criminal probe would freeze HOA accounts pending audit. A civil suit could claw back stolen funds and damages. A recall election would put control back with the residents. It was elegantly simple: death by 1,000 legal cuts. And finally, Cordelia's allies were beginning to show themselves. Vice President Sandra Mueller, turns out she was Cordelia's business partner in real estate, went into immediate damage control mode. Treasurer Frank de la Croix, Sandra's husband, suddenly waved off the financial discrepancies as mere bookkeeping mistakes. The board's secretary's seat had been curiously empty for 8 months, leaving no documented chain of command. Only Bob Morrison seemed genuinely shocked by the corruption, an expression that told me everything I needed to know about how deep this went. My garage transformed into an investigative war room that would make FBI agents envious. Timelines taped to the walls, photo arrays grouped by infraction type, spreadsheets cross-referencing every dubious payment. The steady thump of a stapler became my evening soundtrack as the file swelled thicker than a phone directory. Then Cordelia made one last desperate play. Anonymous letters to the Judicial Review Board accused me of abusing my office for personal revenge. Bogus complaints to the State Bar alleged conflicts of interest. My fence was vandalized, spray paint and loosened boards caught on camera with Sandra Mueller's teenage son on film. She was flinging everything at the wall hoping something would stick. But desperation has a scent, and it was getting stronger every day. The trap was set. County Prosecutor Patricia was salivating over the evidence. State regulators prepared audits. Recall petitions were printed. Everything converged toward the annual whole meeting, the moment when Cordelia's reign would finally be challenged. Justice, democracy, and one judge who'd had enough of petty tyrants were all moving to the same point. The only remaining question was whether she would fight to the end or simply fall. The breakthrough came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, when insomnia and righteous anger drove me back to the municipal archives. I was combing through the HOA's original 1987 charter, hunting for any overlooked leverage. The musty smell of old paper filled the records room as I turned yellowed pages beneath harsh fluorescent lights. Then I found it buried in Section 14 in dense legalese: any board member convicted of fraud, embezzlement, or breach of fiduciary duty would trigger automatic dissolution of the entire board, with new elections required within 60 days under county supervision. My hands shook as I read the clause over and over. The original developers had included a literal nuclear option, one criminal conviction, and the whole would be completely restructured. It felt like discovering a hidden kill switch in the schematics of a warship. Best of all, Cordelia had no idea it existed. None of the current board did. They'd been operating under amended bylaws that conveniently scrubbed this provision from common knowledge over the years. I photographed each page with the care of an archaeologist documenting a priceless find. This wasn't just evidence, it was the key to freeing the whole neighborhood. Then the financial bombshell landed. My accountant friend Jana spent the weekend combing my files like an IRS investigator. Her conclusion dwarfed the fence violations: $127,000 embezzled over 4 years, with money paths leading directly to Cordelia's personal accounts and real estate holdings. The scheme had escalated: small overcharges at first, then fake invoices, and finally outright theft. Jana pointed out something that set my prosecutor instincts on fire: the embezzlement had spiked in the last 18 months. Personal pressure from divorce, a failing real estate market, and growing debt had pushed Cordelia from petty skimming to running a full-scale criminal operation. Sitting in my leather chair surrounded by evidence that could topple a small government, I realized I held the nuclear option. One conviction would dissolve the board, home insurance could reimburse residents, fraud victims would be protected, and new elections could reset governance under proper oversight. I leaned back, planning the endgame with the precision of a chess master. Every move henceforth would be calculated, documented, and surgical. What made it sweeter was the nascent intelligence network that had gathered like a resistance. Marcus's electrician contacts exposed systematic overbilling for routine maintenance. Mrs. Chen's gardener blew the whistle on padded landscaping invoices. The pool company's maintenance supervisor volunteered to testify about fraudulent service claims so brazen they'd make mobsters blush. My phone buzzed constantly with tips, each one another nail in Cordelia's coffin. But the perfect storm extended beyond my own work. County Prosecutor Patricia Valdez wanted a headline case to cement her reputation for cleaning up municipal corruption. The state attorney general had just launched a statewide HOA fraud initiative after similar scandals in Dallas and Austin. Local media were sniffing out whole corruption after reader complaints. And it was election season. Politicians were eager to look tough on the petty graft that enrages voters. Cordelia's vulnerability was now plain as day: divorce-related financial strain, a floundering real estate business, and an embezzlement scheme propping up her lifestyle and likely funding that pricey attorney who'd just lost in court. The desperation showed in little ways. Stronger perfume couldn't hide the cigarette breaks at board meetings, the trembling hands when she thought no one watched, the crack in her voice when she made threats that once sounded authoritative. Everything aligned: criminal evidence, civil claims, regulatory scrutiny, media coverage, and political pressure. Cordelia's empire had been built on sand, and the tide was coming fast. The charter's dissolution clause was my ace, though I didn't need to play it yet. Sometimes the threat of total collapse is more effective than triggering it. I was ready to watch how she reacted as her world unraveled. The morning after I discovered that clause, my dining room looked like an intelligence command center. Maps of the neighborhood were pinned with colored pushpins marking harassment, fiscal irregularities, and selective enforcement. Flowcharts tracked money like bloodhounds follow scent. Sticky notes shuffled across whiteboards. Markers squeaked as I refined strategy. I was orchestrating the most satisfying takedown of my career. First, I assembled my team, not the Avengers, but close enough for local justice. Marcus contributed technical skill and street credibility. Mrs. Chen brought history and moral authority earned over 87 years. Patricia Valdez supplied prosecutorial firepower and media connections that could turn local scandal into statewide headlines. Earl, the retired veteran, brought tactical precision to the team. His organizational skills could have commanded a battalion. Even Bob Morrison, the sole honest member of the whole board, became our man on the inside. My strategy was elegantly simple, a three-pronged assault, executed with military coordination. The criminal case would freeze assets and set a legal precedent. Civil litigation would claw back stolen funds and reimburse victims. Administrative measures would bring in state regulators and strip licenses, an orchestrated barrage of 1,000 small but devastating strikes. The evidence archive grew massive, 347 pages of ledgers, contracts, and invoices that painted a picture more grotesque than abstract art. 89 photographs captured selective enforcement so blatant it could make civil rights attorneys cheer. 23 audio recordings chronicled harassment incidents, including Cordelia's threat to ruin anyone who defied community standards. A meticulous 4-year timeline charted escalation patterns straight out of a criminal psychology manual. The weight of binder rings and thick cardboard evidence boxes became as familiar as my own gavel. Next came the media offensive. Public pressure can move politicians faster than caffeine fires up hummingbirds. Channel 7's investigative reporter, Jennifer Kim, had already begun digging into HOA corruption after a flood of viewer complaints. The local newspaper editor wanted stories that actually mattered to everyday people. Meanwhile, residents were ready to speak out. Online Facebook posts, neighborhood forums, and testimonials poured in, turning Cordelia's PR nightmare into a full-blown storm. But the true masterpiece lay in the financial forensics. My CPLI, Jeanette, traced the stolen funds through a tangled web of shell companies complex enough to rival a space launch sequence. Bank statements revealed whole money paying for personal indulgences, luxury spas, jewelry, extravagant dinners. Property records showed unexplained real estate purchases financed with community funds. From years in prosecution, I'd learned one immutable truth: paper trails don't lie. Financial records are the digital fingerprints of crime, impossible to erase completely. The recall election, once buried under bureaucratic nonsense, turned out to be simple once decoded. We needed 74 signatures out of 147 homes, just 25% to trigger a recall. 30 days for petitions, 45 for elections, easy math. Harder politics. We drafted sample ballots listing reform candidates, people who cared more about fairness than profit. Community education became our ace in the hole. We distributed plain language guides explaining home finances and homeowners' legal rights. Workshops at the community center trained residents how to request records, attend meetings effectively, and document harassment like seasoned prosecutors. Inside intel from Bob Morrison was pure gold. Cordelia was spiraling over missing treasurer files that could expose deeper fraud. Sandra Mueller was doctoring historical documents like a suburban Nixon cover-up. Frank Delacroix had already met with a bankruptcy attorney, clearly bracing for impact. Unauthorized emergency board meetings violated sunshine laws, piling on even more legal exposure. One night, smoke rose from behind the community center. Someone was literally burning evidence. But digital data doesn't die easily. Every file was backed up, encrypted, and stored offsite like part of a resistance network. Technology became our force multiplier. We launched a website, ** Reform Maplewood HOA, complete with downloadable evidence that would make journalists drool. Online petitions collected signatures faster than a viral meme. Databases mapped every pattern of selective enforcement, producing hard statistics of systemic abuse. The neighborhood buzzed with the chime of notifications, each ping another voice joining the movement. Then came my masterpiece, the legal snare. Ethics complaints targeted Cordelia's real estate license for conflicts of interest. Insurance fraud reports went to state regulators, who loved nothing more than tackling white-collar crime. Evidence of tax evasion was sent straight to the IRS because even whole dictators can't dodge the taxman. Every escape hatch was sealed, every LI isolated, every account frozen or tracked. Momentum built faster than I could have dreamed. Prosecutors, sensing political capital, accelerated their investigations. Reporters amplified the story until it swept across social media like wildfire. Residents realized they weren't alone, and unity turned outrage into unstoppable momentum. Cordelia's fatal mistake came when she called for an early annual meeting, racing into a showdown she couldn't win, with a crowd she couldn't control, and evidence she couldn't bury. My makeshift campaign office buzzed with energy, staplers snapping, copiers humming, phones ringing nonstop. Every witness prepped. Every exhibit ready. Every motion fine-tuned to perfection. Desperation has a smell, a cocktail of fear, sweat, and expensive perfume trying to cover panic, and Cordelia reeked of it. The morning after our final planning session, she called an emergency board meeting to expel me as a homeowner for conflict of interest. The logic was breathtakingly absurd, claiming a resident couldn't investigate the hole because he lived there. Like saying witnesses can't testify because they saw the crime. Under the harsh glare of the community center's flickering fluorescent lights, she slammed her gavel before a nearly empty room. Only Sandra sided with her. Even Frank, ever the opportunist, stayed silent because even he could smell the incoming liability. The meeting collapsed for lack of quorum, but seeing Cordelia's face turn the shade of an overripe tomato made the wasted evening worthwhile. That was the moment her smear campaign truly began. Overnight, anonymous flyers blanketed driveways like poisonous snow, accusing me of abusing judicial power to torment innocent volunteers. Cheap ink bled under the morning dew, leaving black smudges on mailboxes throughout the neighborhood. Soon after, fake social media accounts popped up like weeds, hurling rehearsed outrage that would make internet trolls beam with pride. Robocalls bombarded elderly residents with lies smoother than a salesman's pitch. Judge Webb is dismantling HOA protections and threatening your property values. Mrs. Chen received 3 of those calls in one day before she unplugged her phone and showed up at my door, angry as blazing but holding a plate of cookies. Cordelia wasn't content with mere character attacks. She wanted outright sabotage. Our reform campaign signs vanished overnight, replaced by obscene graffiti that would make sailors blush. My mailbox overflowed with threatening letters in block print, clearly the work of an angry teenager with too much time and too little supervision. Marcus woke one morning to find all 4 tires of his work truck slashed, earning him a police report and an expensive reminder that security cameras are worth every penny. Mine caught Sandra Mueller's 16-year-old son red-handed at 2:47 a.m. spray painting my fence with the kind of artistic ambition that might impress street artists but not juvenile judges. The resemblance to his mother was uncanny, the same air of entitlement, the same conviction that rules applied only to others. Meanwhile, financial documents were vanishing faster than evidence in a mob case. The whole office suffered a conveniently selective burglary. Only financial files were taken. Computer hard drives failed with suspicious precision. Bank statements disappeared while being transferred to a new accounting firm no one had approved. The scent of burning paper drifted through the night as shredders worked overtime behind the community center, Santa's elves of destruction. But 2 decades of prosecuting white-collar crime had taught me one thing: digital evidence is like cockroaches, it never truly dies. My subpoenas, routed through Patricia's office, went straight to the banks. Bypassing every hold delay tactic, forensic analysts recovered deleted data from backup servers that crooks always forget about. Insurance companies, bless their obsessive record-keeping, produced years of duplicates, keeping everything except, of course, their customers' money. Every destroyed document had a copy. Every deleted file had a backup. Every lie had a record. Then came the real bombshell. Derek Blackthorne, Cordelia's brother-in-law and owner of Pinnacle Property Services, reached out to Marcus in a panic, sounding like a man about to drown. We met at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, sliding into a back booth like characters in a spy movie. The smell of burnt coffee and bacon grease hung in the air. Derek looked wrecked, eyes hollow, hands trembling as he stirred his cup. "She's lost it," he whispered. The kickbacks were supposed to be temporary, just until her real estate business recovered. Now she's threatening my family if I don't keep inflating invoices. He slid over a thick manila envelope, enough to stop a bullet, stuffed with original invoices that exposed the full scope of the fraud. Phantom projects, undelivered materials, and service bills triple their market value. Under the fluorescent diner lights, the evidence practically glowed. "She's planning something for the annual meeting," Derek warned. "Sandra's calling city council members. claiming you're abusing your position. They want you off the bench before the meeting. But the cracks in Cordelia's empire were spreading faster than she could patch them. Her husband had uncovered the embezzlement and filed for separation, taking their teenage daughter to his mother's house. The girl was humiliated, ostracized at school thanks to the scandal. Even Cordelia's real estate clients were vanishing faster than tourists before a hurricane. Arguments from her house became the neighborhood's evening entertainment. People leaned on fence posts, watching 20 years of marriage and business implode in real time. Media coverage was exploding. Channel 7's investigation had expanded into a 5-part expose on statewide HOA corruption. The local paper published daily front-page stories that made Watergate look like a parking violation. Online, #Maplewood corruption was trending. Reaching 15,000 residents and counting, news vans lined the streets, their humming generators replacing the usual suburban calm. Law enforcement moved in quickly. FBI financial crimes units joined the investigation, bringing the kind of muscle that made local prosecutors look like mall cops. Asset forfeiture froze Cordelia's accounts with surgical precision. Her real estate license was suspended pending review, cutting off her last source of legitimate income. The chill of steel handcuffs was already within reach as federal agents assembled airtight warrants with the precision of Swiss watchmakers. Community backing surged past the tipping point when 89 residents signed the recall petitions well beyond what was required. Reform candidates officially entered the race with campaign promises rooted in transparency, accountability, and basic decency. The Take Back Our Community rally was set for the weekend before the annual meeting, complete with backyard grills, patriotic music, and the kind of civic enthusiasm that tends to make politicians sweat. Soon the scent of charcoal and conviction would fill the neighborhood air as democracy prepared to reclaim its ground. But Cordelia wasn't done yet. In one last desperate maneuver, she tried to dissolve the entire HOA to dodge prosecution. Her emergency legal filings argued that residents could manage just fine without board oversight, about as logical as saying banks don't need locks because customers are naturally honest. Judge Patricia Henley denied the motion with record speed, leaving metaphorical skid marks on the court docket and sanctioning Cordelia's attorney for wasting judicial time with frivolous nonsense. The mountain of evidence had grown to biblical proportions. More contractors stepped forward with stories of kickbacks that would make mob accountants envious. Insurance investigators uncovered fraudulent claims stretching back 6 years. And tax audits revealed hidden income that would make the IRS salivate. My printer churned nonstop, spitting out document after document, the mechanical hum becoming the anthem of justice as the files multiplied like spring rabbits. Everything pointed toward the upcoming annual meeting, the day when Cordelia's regime would finally face its reckoning, and the community, now united, would reclaim its voice. The only suspense left was whether she'd surrender with grace or lash out like a cornered beast. My money was on the latter. Then, on a Tuesday morning that split Maplewood's history cleanly into before and after, the federal grand jury struck 14 counts: fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy landed squarely on Cordelia Blackthorne. State-level charges quickly followed suit: insurance fraud, tax evasion, and breach of fiduciary duty. Her real estate license was revoked so fast it practically burned rubber in the state database. My phone buzzed endlessly with breaking news alerts like Christmas morning for anyone who believed in accountability. Cordelia's panic became legendary. She tried to flee the jurisdiction with the elegance of a wounded rhinoceros and was caught at the airport clutching $47,000 in cash and a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands. When that failed, she scrambled to sell off hidden assets that were already frozen tighter than a politician's grin during election season. Her last-ditch plea came as a rambling Facebook post begging for forgiveness, one that went viral for all the wrong reasons. Smudged mascara and trembling hands became her new reality. As the news tightened faster than a movie trash compactor, the media circus exploded. National outlets picked up the story as the ultimate cautionary tale of HOA corruption gone berserk, a suburban tyranny meets federal justice. I found myself on courthouse steps, giving interviews as the judge who exposed neighborhood fraud, trying to maintain composure while inwardly celebrating like a kid opening presents. Documentary. Producers requested access for exposes on municipal corruption. The clicking of camera shutters replaced birdsong as reporters descended on Maplewood like designer-clad locusts with press bosses. But the greatest reward came not from headlines, it came from the healing that began the day. Cordelia's arrest hit the news. The county-appointed interim board immediately froze all bogus fines and began issuing reimbursement checks with the speed of tax refunds during election season. Fresh paint soon covered vandalized walls, and pride in the neighborhood bloomed once again. Sandra Mueller and Frank Delocqua's empires collapsed like paper houses in a wind tunnel. Sandra pled guilty to conspiracy, her real estate business crumbling overnight. Frank struck a deal, turning over evidence so detailed it made prosecutors misty-eyed. The soft thud of for sale signs being planted on their lawns was music to our ears. Derek Blackthorne's cooperation proved invaluable. His complete financial logs exposed kickback operations so intricate they could have been designed by Swiss engineers. His sworn testimony about inflated invoices and fake projects became the bedrock of the prosecution's case. His decision to come clean demonstrated that honesty truly is the smartest survival tactic, especially when federal prison looms. From the ashes of corruption, a reformed HOA emerged, democracy reborn. I accepted the interim presidency with the same sense of obligation that had guided my years on the bench. Marcus took over as treasurer, bringing blue-collar integrity and sharp budgeting skills. Mrs. Chen became our community liaison, her 87 years of experience finally earning the respect long overdue. Arl handled architectural review with the kind of precision that made military inspections look relaxed, and Bob Morrison remained as secretary, this time serving transparency, not cover-ups. The new board adopted policies with constitutional thoroughness. All contracts now required competitive bidding and public review. Financial statements were posted monthly online, with a level of openness that would make most government agencies blush. Residents' rights were finally protected through a fair appeals process, and no major expense could pass without community input. Democracy, once dormant, was thriving again. Naturally, the State Judicial Ethics Committee scrutinized my involvement with forensic intensity. Their unanimous finding, all my actions fell squarely within homeowners' rights and professional conduct. They even commended the use of my legal expertise to serve the public good, affirming that fighting corruption is precisely what a judge should do off the bench. The echo of that gavel closing the hearing sounded like pure vindication. The ripple effect was immediate. Other HOA letters from 3 neighboring counties reached out for guidance on reform. The state legislature scheduled hearings to discuss new oversight laws inspired by the Maplewood model. Prosecutor Patricia Valdez used the case as a launchpad for her attorney general campaign, vowing to eradicate municipal corruption statewide. My wallet grew thick with business cards from communities seeking advice, proof that this movement had spread far beyond our quiet suburb. But Cordelia still had one last act of desperation. From her jail cell, she tried to bargain for leniency by accusing me of waging a personal vendetta, rogue judge bent on vengeance. Her lawyer painted me as some kind of suburban Batman, wielding the gavel like a vigilante weapon. Federal prosecutor Patricia Valdez shot down the plea deal instantly, pressing forward with evidence so damning it could make any defense attorney reconsider their career path. The final clang of that cell door was the unmistakable sound of justice delivered. Preparations for the annual whole meeting took on the energy of a grand finale. What was once a dull procedural gathering had transformed into a public celebration of democracy's return. For the first time, media crews were invited, and ensuring a level of transparency that would make even government agencies green with envy. All 147 households were personally invited to experience genuine democracy, something far removed from the staged performances Cordelia had orchestrated for years. The rich scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the community center, mingling with the sense of anticipation from residents finally able to speak freely without fearing backlash. Security measures were added not to exclude, but to ensure everyone could enter safely. The venue was expanded in preparation for record-breaking attendance, as local media hailed it the most significant whole meeting in county history. But the most moving sight was watching neighbors step out from years of intimidation like blossoms after a long winter. Those once silenced by violations shared their stories openly. Victims of financial deceit compared experiences with the warmth of a support group. Reform candidates emerged with promises of transparency and integrity instead of greed. Each signature on a petition felt like the texture of democracy itself, citizens reclaiming their community from corruption's ashes, everything built toward one defining moment, when justice, civic unity, and moral courage would finally overcome tyranny and fraud. This meeting wouldn't be another bureaucratic performance. It would be a celebration of what happens when good people stand their ground and when one determined judge decides enough is enough. The only lingering question was whether the community center could hold all those eager to see justice served with a generous helping of accountability. When the long-awaited day arrived, excitement buzzed through Maplewood like energy before Super Bowl or presidential election. The annual Whole Meeting, once a dreaded obligation, had become the hottest event in town, a full-fledged democracy revival. Channel 7's news vans rolled in at dawn, generators humming like mechanical honeybees as crews prepared their cameras with the precision of a space launch. Reporter Jennifer Kim had billed the gathering as the grand finale of her 5-part HOA Corruption Expose, promising a front-row view of justice live and unfiltered. By evening, the community center's parking lot looked like a festival of civic pride. 134 of the 147 households were represented, the highest turnout in the neighborhood's 37-year history. Folding chairs filled every inch of space. Overflow seating spilled onto the patio, and outdoor speakers broadcast the proceedings to those unable to squeeze inside. Feedback from the sound system merged with animated chatter as neighbors once isolated by fear came together with shared purpose. At precisely 7 p.m., I stepped up to the podium. The microphone felt familiar after 2 decades of judicial rulings, but this moment carried a deeper warmth, as if I were addressing family rather than defendants. Friends and neighbors, I began, my voice grounded in both authority and gratitude. 6 months ago, many of us felt powerless against a system built to intimidate and exploit. Tonight, we celebrate what happens when a community finds its voice and demands accountability. Applause rolled through the room like sunlight cresting over mountains, gratitude and hope filled the air. Marcus then presented the financial recovery report, turning spreadsheets into something inspiring. His delivery had the precision of an electrician and the impact of a heavyweight punch. He revealed $89,000 in fraudulent charges had been reversed and refunded to residents, with $127,000 in total recovered through asset forfeiture. The funds would finance community improvements for years to come. Insurance companies had covered every resident reimbursement, affirming that victims deserved protection, not punishment. Gasps and joyful murmurs rippled across the room as residents realized they were holding real settlement checks, money reclaimed from the very criminals who had taken it. The evening's dramatic peak came with a live update from the courthouse downtown, where Cordelia's trial had reached its conclusion. At 7:47 p.m., Jennifer Kim's phone buzzed. The room fell silent. Guilty on 12 of 14 counts, she announced. The sentencing was swift and just: 4 years in federal prison, $180,000 in restitution, and permanent loss of her real estate license. Sandra Mueller received 18 months probation and 500 hours of community service, a fitting lesson in what community truly means. When Kim turned the camera toward me for the live broadcast that would become local history, I felt the culmination of 20 years on the bench distilled into one moment. Judge Webb, she asked solemnly, what message would you give to other communities battling corruption? I looked straight into the lens, knowing my words would reach countless people trapped in similar nightmares. Document everything. Know your rights, never let bullies win through fear, and remember, democracy works only when good people refuse to stay silent. The camera panned over cheering residents, capturing a unity so heartfelt it could have brought Norman Rockwell to tears. Then, I revealed one final surprise destined for neighborhood legend. The seized assets from Cordelia's operation have funded a $45,000 community improvement trust. Tonight, we vote on how to use money stolen from us but returned by justice. As the scent of cake filled the air, so did the sweet aroma of victory. Residents cheered as the vote passed unanimously: new playgrounds for families, pool repairs for everyone, and a memorial garden to honor those who stood up to tyranny. Outside, Children's laughter echoed the soundtrack of a reborn neighborhood. Recognition followed like a local Oscars for civic courage. Marcus earned the Community Leadership Award for organizing resistance when hope seemed lost. Mrs. Chen was honored for her tireless service, proving that courage and wisdom never age. Earl's flag display was officially approved in a ceremony that brought veterans to tears. The sound of kids playing outside underscored the perfect ending. The neighborhood restored, united, and free. The installation of the new board felt like a miniature constitutional convention, the rebirth of real democracy in action. My election as permanent president was unanimous not because I sought authority, but because the community placed faith in judicial integrity over personal ambition. The new board swore an oath to uphold transparency, one we might have etched into stone if the budget allowed. Our first motion passed without a single objection. Every meeting would be recorded and made public, because sunlight remains the best disinfectant against corruption. National attention followed swiftly, drawn to our revival like moths to the light of justice. Good Morning America aired our story as living proof that personal courage can drive systemic change. Social media ignited with #Maplewood model hashtags as communities everywhere shared their own HOA nightmares and blueprints for reform. The buzz of incoming notifications became the steady rhythm of influence spreading beyond our borders. Law enforcement's presence that evening served as final validation. Sheriff's deputies joined as honored guests, with Sergeant Rodriguez praising our cooperation for making their work smoother. FBI agents from the Financial Crimes Division spoke passionately about fraud prevention. Energized by an audience that finally cared, the firm handshakes and glinting badges under the center's lights embodied democracy and justice in perfect sync. Yet the night's emotional heart belonged to the residents whose bravery made it all possible. An elderly widow wept, thanking me for saving her home from foreclosure triggered by fabricated fines. A young couple from Lot 134 announced they were staying, saying our neighborhood was finally safe for honest people. The veterans group presented a new flag to replace the one Cordelia once labeled a violation. Patriotism restored to its rightful place. The rustle of tissues and heartfelt words filled the hall like music from angels rejoicing in hard-won justice. As the evening drew to a close and neighbors left with hope rekindled, I realized this was the culmination of 2 decades on the bench, not merely issuing rulings, but helping a community rediscover its voice and its future. Some of the best judgments, I thought, are made far beyond the courtroom. 6 months later, Maplewood Estates had evolved from a cautionary tale into a symbol of what's possible, a place visited by those seeking proof that justice still works. Property values rose 12%, not through restrictive covenants, but because people wanted to live where transparency replaced tyranny. Each night, laughter from children at the renovated playground mingled with splashes from families enjoying a pool, finally serving the people, not enriching crooks. Since the new board's election, not a single frivolous violation had been issued. The appeals process sat and touched a quiet monument to fairness that made residents feel protected, not persecuted. Mrs. Chen's expanded community garden flourished, its blooms perfuming the air with scents sweeter than any fragrance Cordelia ever flaunted. Her ceramic gnome stood proudly among prize-winning tomatoes, silent proof that individuality and shared standards can thrive side by side. My woodworking shop had become the neighborhood's unofficial gathering place. The smooth cedar beneath my hands offered therapy for years of courtroom strain. That little workshop came to symbolize everything Cordelia's rule had tried to crush: creativity, collaboration, and freedom. The ripple of reform kept expanding. Within months, 23 communities across 4 states reached out for advice, transforming our local victory into a regional movement. The Maplewood Act sailed through the state legislature with bipartisan support, tightening oversight and imposing penalties on board members who abused their fiduciary duties. Prosecutor Patricia Valdez, who led the original case, won her campaign for Attorney General in a landslide. Her promise to root out municipal corruption resonating with voters sick of petty dictators hiding behind HOA titles. Her victory proved that justice isn't just morally right, it's politically powerful. One act of courage really can spark systemic change. One voice raised in defiance can inspire entire neighborhoods to reclaim their futures. That summer, The local high school announced the Community Accountability Scholarship, $5,000 a year for students pursuing law, public service, or any discipline dedicated to protecting communities from corruption. The applause during the announcement blended with the sweet scent of possibility. It honored every resident who had dared to speak truth to power, turning hardship into hope for the next generation. Cordelia, meanwhile, served 3 years in federal prison. Ironically, she worked in the law library, reportedly helping other inmates with appeals, perhaps learning the meaning of justice when freedom could no longer be bought. Her restitution payments continued under court supervision, each installment a reminder that crime ultimately doesn't pay. Her former home now belonged to a young family whose laughter and bicycle wheels filled the street with the joyful sounds of renewal. Marcus's electrical business flourished, his reputation for honesty attracting customers from neighboring towns. He hired 2 new electricians from within Maplewood, proving that integrity can be both profitable and community building. The hum of power tools became the anthem of honest labor, rebuilding trust one project at a time. Mrs. Chen began hosting Democracy in Action workshops, drawing attendees from across the county. Her 87 years of experience finally had a stage. The fragrance of jasmine tea drifted through each evening session as she spoke with the conviction of a civics teacher who genuinely believed in her students' potential. Earl's flag now flew freely, no longer under threat of violation notices. His memorial garden became a sanctuary for veterans finding peace that went deeper than the soil they tended. The soft flutter of fabric in the wind stood as a living emblem of liberty reclaimed. But perhaps the greatest triumph was simply watching our neighborhood return to what it was always meant to be, a place where families thrived without fear, where diversity was embraced, and where community meant cooperation, not control. Then one Tuesday morning, my phone rang, a familiar sound that made me smile. On the line was another desperate voice from a mountain town battling corruption over water rights. Facing a management company even worse than Cordelia's, Judge Webb, the caller said. Echoing the same exhaustion I'd once felt, "We've heard about Maplewood. Can you help us too?" The next chapter was calling, and I understood that battling corruption had evolved beyond a personal crusade. It had become a purpose that merged my years of judicial service with a newfound sense of community duty. Together, they gave meaning to everything I'd done. But tonight, as I sat in my backyard workshop surrounded by the scent of cedar shavings and the faint murmur of neighbors chatting across fences, I paused to reflect on what truly made it all worthwhile. Sometimes, the system really does work the way it should when ordinary people refuse to stay silent and choose to stand up for what's right. In the distance, the community celebration carried on while another peaceful Tuesday evening bathed our neighborhood in warm, golden light. The American flag rippled softly in the breeze, mingling with the joyful sounds of children playing and families finally free to live without fear. That right there is what real victory sounds like. Not triumphant music or the echo of a gavel, but the quiet rhythm of everyday life lived with dignity, and neighborhoods people can proudly call home. What about you? Have your own Hoa nightmare? Share it in the comments. Your story might be the spark that helps another community find the courage to fight back and reclaim what's theirs. And if this story reminded you that one person can make a difference, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more tales where justice defeats corruption. Communities rise above control, and ordinary people discover their extraordinary strength simply by refusing to stay silent. Because democracy thrives when everyone takes part, and justice tastes even sweeter when it's served with a side of community healing. Until next time, keep standing tall and keep fighting the good fight. Your neighborhood is counting on you. From all of us here at Hoa Stories, thank you for watching today's Hoa Karen Meltdown. If you enjoyed seeing neighbors stand firm and karma do its work, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of Hoa Justice we bring your way.